Hi, everybody, and welcome to Signature West Podcast. I'm your host, Sam West from Palm Springs, California. As you know, I'm a seasoned real estate agent since 1991. And I bring you this podcast to bring you inspiring stories. Some real estate related, some are not. Nonetheless, it's all Coachella Valley, it's all Palm Springs. And if you want to find out more, go to www.samwest.co. Regarding the LA fire, if you or somebody that you know impacted and need a place to stay and get out of LA completely, I have a few options from one bedroom, one bath space to a single family home. So reach out, go to my website, contact me, and I'm glad to hook you up and you can just get out of LA and chill for a little bit or for a long time. Okay? All right. My guest today is Dee Dee Star. Dee Dee Star. Hello, Dee Dee.
Hi, I'm
Good
doing
morning.
well.
How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well.
Let me just change this
Grateful
here.
to not be in LA right now, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So you are from Toronto, Canada, and you moved here in 2020.
I moved here about 6 years ago. So yeah,
And what
a
made
little
you
before.
what made you move here? What was the reason?
Well, California was always the goal. And I moved from Brooklyn, so I lived in New York for a little bit, waiting for my green card. And once my green card number came up, I knew that California was the place I wanted to be. I didn't want to move to another big American city like LA. I felt like I loved my experience in New York, but the grind of a large American city was a little too much for my Canadian soul. And I had been visiting Palm Springs for many years. And I love all things mid-century modern. I've always felt that I was born in the wrong decade, and I've always loved the 50s and the 60s, and I would vacation here. And I always knew that this was a bachelorette town, and teaching has always been a big part of my business. And I was watching this town thinking, well, when is somebody going to do burlesque here? And considering that a lot of this town had some of the most incredible legends of burlesque perform here in the heyday of Palm Springs, I just was so curious as to why no one had been, doing anything with burlesque here in this beautiful town.
Tell us what that is. Tell the people what that is. What do you mean by that type of style that you're referring to?
Yeah, well, burlesque. I mean, the history of burlesque is incredibly long. I could talk about it for hours. But to give you a sort of a little intro into what burlesque is the art of the striptease. It definitely got really, really popular in the U.S. Um, in the 50s and 60s. So it was the art of the striptease. It was definitely a part of the whole vaudeville sort of shows, as well as different traveling circuses and things like that. And so originally burlesque in the US in the 50s and 60s, it would be, one or two strippers in amongst a whole bunch of other singers and musicians and like magic and comedy and that whole vaudevillian sort of feel of a show. And then that's sort of how it gained some traction, and people realized, oh, everybody just loves burlesque. And so that's when burlesque shows sort of kind of opened up all around the US, and it made a name for itself. So it's a very classic historical form of striptease. Burlesque dancers in the day were definitely they were considered risque. There was a lot of judgment and things that were passed on towards them. Whereas now, it being 2024, burlesque is pretty tame, is considering what's available for like that sexy, market. But I've always loved it, and it's all about pageantry and character and a gimmick. And Gypsy, the movie, Gypsy Rose Lee, is a great little sort of intro to it. And Gypsy Rose Lee performed here in Palm Springs, as well as a lot of other amazing legends in this town. And ultimately, that was one of the major decisions. Also, the desert just called me, which I feel most people who live here in Palm Springs that are transplants understand what I'm talking about, where it's just this call, and I listened to it and followed it, and I'm really happy to be here for sure.
Yeah, he called me, I don't know, like 20 years ago, and I did it, but I didn't quite listen. So I left. They called me again. So I moved back in 2020, just a little bit after you. Um, was it was it difficult to Palm Springs for the ones that are listening? It's a very small town, obviously. And the Coachella Valley in itself is a very small little world. It's like a bubble. Was it difficult to introduce your talent to a small world?
Yeah, it was. It was a lot harder. So, and I moved to Palm Springs not knowing anybody here. So I think that also made it more challenging. And
Yeah.
when I first moved here, I burlesque was not wanted, and it was very, very clear to me. So after being here for about 6 months, I mean, teaching bachelorettes, thank goodness, within the first 6 months of me moving here, um, people all want to learn burlesque, and they're interested in the history and learning how to dance like the old bump and grinders.
Right.
So that was really easy. But as far as performing, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No one wanted it. I think just being a cisgendered woman was another big thing for me, where people didn't want to hire me at all. And so I basically taught more. And then I basically took burlesque out of everything, off my website, off of
Oh,
all my social media when I first moved here, because I knew that nobody wanted it and it was judged very negatively. I thought because this town was so historical that people would know what it was, but
right.
they didn't. And I was definitely, yeah, judged pretty poorly, which was a big shocker for me.
Right.
And I took burlesque right off of everything, and I just marketed myself as a dancer, because I'm trained in all forms of dance. Burlesque just happens to be my favorite and where my
Right.
heart lies. But
Right.
I've been dancing since I was 3, so I can do many different forms.
Right.
Um, and then once I started marketing myself just as a dancer, that was when, people like the GAN band were like, oh, well, we would love a go-go dancer. That's when Modernism Week was like, oh, well, we want 60s go-go. And, places like PS Underground. All of these are, major music venues and music events and people that celebrate the history of the history and the art of Palm Springs. And that's sort of how I ended up making a name for myself and starting to perform in Palm Springs. And then once people got to know me and they'd see me perform, and I would talk about burlesque and my love of it, then little by little, different venues and clients were interested in me doing it.
And that's
So
how I
I,
found you.
right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't only do burlesque. I do many different forms. But the fact that there wasn't burlesque here in Palm Springs was a big reason why I moved here.
Did the burlesque acceptance change by now, or is still an issue in Palm Springs?
I think it's still an issue.
Still an
Yeah, I
issue.
think it's definitely gotten better for sure. I think that people know who I am and they've seen what I do, and they understand the art form a little bit more than when I first moved here. But I still think it's this town is a lot more conservative than people think it is, and
Oh
that was
no,
a
I know,
big
I know, I
shocker.
know. Oh yeah. Oh no, believe me, I know. Yeah, it's funny, 'cause I had a restaurant here in 1989. Yes. And so I lived here then, and I know this is back in the day. So I do know that out in Palm Springs, people think it's a very small bubble, but the overall there is a very conservative element to it as well, and people still not able to shake and bake and get out of that old feather. But I'm assuming one day we all will. We all will. One thing I know about you, you did 3 parties for me, and one thing I noticed about you, and I want to say it to everybody, it almost fathoms me. You can perform for 5 people, or you can perform for 500 people, and you still perform the same way. Like your face does not change, which I think is very interesting. You know, you think you will feel the energy less, or you think you would be less excited, but you're not. Your excitement and your entire demeanor and your entire dress code is for one person or for 1,000 people is the same. So hats off to you.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
love that. I love that. So let's move to the current where you are today. So you don't know this, but in the late 80s, I lived in LA. I went to a club called Peanuts. It's in West Hollywood. It doesn't exist anymore. And I used to go there. Well, it changed owners. I think the owner at the time passed away later on. And then in the 90s, it became like a different animal in itself. So my understanding that the Dan Gore, the owner of the famous Oscars here in Palm Springs, it's a destination if you don't know what it is. So really, it's one of the best destinations here. Had an idea to bring something from that era to Palm Springs, and that's how you now are doing every Friday night. What is that all about?
Yeah. So I'd worked with Dan a few different times, the owner of Oscars, over the years. And so, we met and I always really loved him, and his venue really is a legendary staple spot for live entertainment in Palm Springs. And his history of producing and his experience in live entertainment is really quite stellar.
All right.
Um, and yeah, but Oscars is definitely known more so for their drag shows, for their tea dance. And that's definitely their market. And I ran into Dan one day at Starbucks. And we were just talking about different things, and he just said, Dee Dee, he was like, I've had this idea, and I've had this idea for a really long time. And he wanted to, open up Oscars to a little bit more of a different demographic and offer a different kind of show, something that's not happening in Palm Springs. And he said, I want an all-female cast. I want it to be rock and roll. And he gave me all these creative ideas. And he was the one who told me about Peanuts, which I try to know about the history of dance and live entertainment and things that have happened, all across the US, like around the world. But I'd never heard of
It's a
Peanuts.
very small venue, and it's an era of time. It's not like a Studio 51, 54, whatever, I forget the name.
Yeah.
The name you would know. It's not that, but it still has a little iconic flair in the West Hollywood world. So unless you were engaged in that world, you would not know, but it was legendary.
It really is a hidden gem. And so he said, he was like, could you do it? Do you know the girls? Can you produce it? Can you choreograph it? Can this be something that we offer? And I went down the wormhole of this Peanuts nightclub in West Hollywood, and I just fell in love with the whole concept. And um the fact that they would, give cisgendered women, I think it was either a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, that it would be, because Peanuts would do a lot of trans shows and things like that. So they really were this trailblazing venue offering things back in the day that were unheard of. So it was this little secret hidden gem of West Hollywood. But on, this random weekday night, they would have cisgendered women come in and do a rock and roll striptease show. And that was one of, Dan's favorite things, and he loved it. And I looked into it. And what I loved about it was that literally in the 80s and the 90s, all of the rock and roll videos, music videos that I've loved, they would have all the cool dancers. And I've always been obsessed and admired all of those women. And that's where they would get them from. So all the video vixens from the 80s and 90s all came from peanuts, which I just think is so cool.
You have
Yeah,
to
so
start
Dan, we just
somewhere. You have to start. You
right.
have to start somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, and they were all just, incredible. And all of these women are nameless women. No one knows who, what their names were or who they were, but they know the video and they know the girl that was dancing and how influential that was on a lot of us, growing up, or even for the more younger market now, just watching these old 80s videos. It's very inspiring. So it was really cool to go down that wormhole and learn about this whole aspect of, women in dance, and the history of it, and to bring something to Palm Springs that there's nothing like it here. There aren't very many rock and roll shows. There are no other all-female cast shows. We are the only one that's happening now. And I've gotten to co-create and collaborate with some of like the desert's most incredible women. The cast, we all have a different flavor as to, what rock and roll means to us and the kind of style of dance and show and gimmick. So I've given them all the history of burlesque. And yes, there is an element of striptease in the show. The name of the show is called Strip. But there's no nudity. And really, the whole show concept, I've given all of the solo performers the freedom to be their inner rock vixen. And what does that mean to you? And it means something different to every member in the cast, but it just brings this really cool, well-rounded, unique show that's happening, yeah, every Friday in Palm Springs. So it's really exciting. And I
How
love
many?
Dan.
How many are you on the cast?
So in the cast, I have a roster of 7 dancers in total.
Okay.
But in each show, you're gonna get 4 soloists in each show. And I have one amazing host, Christine. We love her. She's definitely well known in Palm Springs. And then we have a couple of kittens who are like just kind of they help us out and they make the show run smoothly. And there's group choreography. I mean, we dance on walls. We're coming out of everywhere. You never know what you're going to get. Each solo is different. So it's about a 90-minute show.
Oh wow.
There's no intermission. It just starts amazing, and we just take you on this rock and roll journey for just under 90 minutes. So it's pretty fun.
And is it so? It's the same show every Friday, correct? Doesn't you guys just
It's
change?
it's you're never gonna get the same show
Oh
twice. No.
really?
Yeah, you're never gonna get the same show twice. Granted, our opening number and our closing number are the same, but with this rotating cast and rotating soloists, there's always going to be a different flavor, a different experience. No show is the same, and it's really important that it is the show. This isn't Broadway. I don't want it to be the same 5, 6, 7, 8
Oh wow.
for each show. So you're always going to get something a little different at each different Friday
So if I
night. So
come tonight, I come next Friday night, I will see different shows.
yeah.
Wow. 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 And
There'll
what
be
time?
things that are similar. It's not a completely,
Right.
it's
But
not a
that's
completely different show, but it's also definitely not the same show every Friday.
right. Which is actually makes it very exciting because people we are driven by tourism. So I guess if you're gonna gonna visit Palm Springs and you're gonna come tonight and your friend might come next week, you're gonna have 2 different shows and you can discuss it among yourselves and compare which one like different shows and for what reason, I suppose. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And what time does the show start?
The doors are at 8 and the show is at 9 p.m. We start 9 p.m. sharp.
Where do you see the show if you would close your eyes and obviously now you've been doing this for how long? The show I think it started like 2 months ago.
We started in November.
November.
Yeah.
So now you've done November, December, and the holidays, and now in the new year. So if you and Dan would close your eyes and say, "What I want to see with this show to evolve to," what would you want to say?
Ideally, I want us to be, the staple the staple show on a Friday night where, you know, people come into town, whether you're, you know, you're local or you're visiting and you don't know what to do on a Friday night, and everybody knows that you go to Oscars and you come and watch an amazing rock and roll show. We do, you know, seasonally, we're going to change up the opening numbers and the costuming and things like that. And as well as I want to include as many women as possible in the show. So I'm always open to audition new women. I'm also, you know, always interested in talking to other people who want to collaborate and work with us on it. Because it can be really hard to be like a cisgendered woman in this town. So if Dan and I can be, you know, the opportunity to showcase the talent of these incredible women that live here. That's my dream. My dream is to have an amazing show and we pay everybody well. And it's known. I want to be in all the magazines, on billboards, and I would love this to be around for, you know, another 10 years.
Wow, I love that. That's great. That's great. Because you guys do what you do, Motherism Week, and that's been going on. That's another angle that you focus on, and that's been going doing really well for you. So hopefully, Strip will strip everybody and get to go to see it. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for Dan, and I have not seen the show. I'm gonna get my butt down there and see it. Now that it's every Friday is different. I gotta pick the right Friday, I guess. Dee Dee, good luck and thank you for coming. Everybody that's watching or listening, if you come to Palm Springs, if you live in Palm Springs, go to Oscars on a Friday night and give this lady some love. Um, Again, if you like what you've heard, please subscribe. It's for free. And if you want to know more, go to www.samwest.co. And we will see you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Happy New Year, everybody.